The truth is, most of us want to paint just because we want to paint happy little clouds. And while I don't have a cool afro or a pet squirrel, this is my take on how you paint skies that may or may not contain happy little clouds in watercolor. I'm actually going to start with the backside of a painting that was from 20 years ago that I never finished and probably never will. The nice thing is it's on Arches 300-pound cold press paper, and fun fact, Arches 300-pound paper is dual-sided, so while I'll never finish the other side of the painting, I can use the backside. I don't usually paint just a blue sky with blue all the way across. I like to vary the colors a little bit, so I typically have a plan for skies. In this one, I'm going from a green-blue on the left side to a purple on the right side, and my ultramarine is in the middle. So in general, my idea was it's going to be more green-blue on the left, more of the ultramarine blue in the middle, and more of the purple on the right side, just to give it some character and, make it so that you don't have just a stale blue sky that looks boring. Two important things to remember about clouds. The higher they are on the horizon, the taller they are, and the higher on the horizon they are, the steeper the angle is, as illustrated by my fancy drawing. Hey, don't mock my sticky note drawing. That's high art. You probably noticed that I didn't draw my clouds out in pencil ahead of time, and that's partly because I've done this a few times, but it's also because pencil lines show through watercolor, so you really have to be careful, especially with skies with soft colors. If you paint over your pencil lines, you're donezo. You can't erase them. They're there. So my suggestion is, if you're a newer painter, to by all means draw your clouds out ahead of time, but draw them very lightly so that they're harder to see through the paint. Back to colors for a minute. I'm using 5 colors on this painting. I'm not using all 92 colors that I own. I just picked 5 colors. Actually, I meant to pick 6, but unfortunately I kind of forgot the yellow when I painted this, so sorry yellow. Maybe next time. So I tend to pick 3 primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and 3 secondary colors, green, purple, and orange. And I use just those colors. I don't have black, I don't have white. Oops, it looks like I just dropped my brush. I didn't even clean up that mess. We're just moving forward here. All right, anywho, notice how I'm just adding water to the painting and it's blooming out. This is one of the fun things about wet on wet painting, is depending on how wet or dry your paper is and how wet or dry your brush is, you'll get different effects. So if your paper is just damp and you've got a really wet brush like there, you'll get, the paint will bloom out like it just did. So kind of a fun effect. Usually happens when you don't want it to, but if you know that that's what it's going to do, then you can plan accordingly. Actually, when I was a newer painter and I didn't know why blooms happened like that, it would happen to me all the time in just the worst times. So I'd be painting on a sky or whatever, and the paint would start to dry, and then I would just, without thinking, go in with a super wet brush, and then pretty soon you got a bloom going on, and it's going in all the wrong directions, and then you try to fix it, and trying to fix a bloom when your paper is just damp is really tough. So it's usually better just to kind of let it go and fix it after it dries. You might notice that I come in every once in a while with this brush, a hog hair bristle brush, that I just have water on, and I use it to soften up edges. It has a really coarse set of hair, and it doesn't have a sharp edge, and it's really good for softening edges. So that's primarily what I use it for, is for using water on it and softening edges. You can also use it for some cool effects, trees and things, but I usually have it in my left hand ready to swap it to my right hand to soften an edge just whenever I need to. I've kept my paper pretty wet so far, so you'll notice I keep painting over some of the same places. So this is wet on wet painting, and as long as the paper is somewhat wet, you can keep going over and over and over the same spot with color and it'll continue to mix smoothly. Now, if it gets to a certain point of dryness, you'll end up with the blooms that I talked about earlier, so you just need to let it dry at that point. But so far, like the top right of the sky is still plenty wet, so I just keep messing with it. I don't necessarily recommend you mess with it that much, but I kind of like to, and I'm showing that you can. Also, the cheaper paper doesn't seem to like having you fuss with it as much, so I do recommend getting at least the 100% cotton paper if you want to keep going over and over and over in a spot and keeping it wet. The nicer paper, like Arches, does put up with a beating much better than the cheap paper. So that's one of the main reasons why I like Arches paper, is because I can paint over it and over it and over it, and it holds up. The paper doesn't disintegrate like the cheaper papers do. Here's a little known hack for painting wet on wet that you probably won't like, but I've tried it a few times and it works pretty well. So if you want your paper to stay wetter for a long period of time so you can mess with it without worrying about it drying too fast, take it to the beach and paint outside in 40-degree weather, and it'll stay basically wet for as long as, basically until your face goes numb. And I've done that a few times. It works pretty well, actually, other than the whole face numb thing. On the other hand, if you were, say, hypothetically painting at a golf event where you're supposed to be the expert showing that you know how to paint, and it's 95 degrees out and you're painting in the direct sun and your paint dries immediately and your painting looks like hot garbage because of it, then the real trick is to try to convince the fancy people that are watching you that, yeah, basically this is how it's supposed to look. Your painting is supposed to look like hot garbage. I'm sneaking a little bit of my red up into the sky here. I think it helps tie my painting together by having just a little bit of each color spread throughout the painting. So if I were painting a big area of grass, for instance, I wouldn't just paint it green. I would paint it, maybe green, but sneak some of my other colors in there as well. Although now it looks like I'm having so much fun adding red that this may turn into a sunset if I'm not careful, but since I'm just making it up as I go, I see what the colors are doing and make adjustments on the fly. So if it's a sunset, it's a sunset. That's it for now. Happy painting, and let me know in the comments if you think my clouds are in fact happy, or maybe forlorn, bemused, excited.